My point is, there is a purpose of why God created the tree of knowledge of good and evil for a good purpose. I mean, what's funny is that God told Adam you could eat from any tree, and then he told him about the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that you'll surely die, and right after that, that's when he was talking about, oh, man should not be alone. He needs to have a helper. I mean, that's just a pretty interesting correlation with the whole tree of knowledge of good and evil, and then directly talks about Adam having a helper. So really, what is the purpose of the tree of life ultimately? Is Eve choose goodness. God had a sense that something evil was going to happen. Now, obviously, God did not create evil. He can't. It's not of his nature, but it's a lack of goodness. He had a sense that there was a lack of goodness that was going to come to harm Adam and Eve, to misuse their freedom to choose evil. Now, here's the part where it talks about sex. In Genesis 4:1, the whole thing with knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, knowing, right? In Genesis 4:1 it says, and Adam knew Eve his wife, knew meaning intimately, and she conceived and bare Cain and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Again, in Genesis 4:17, and Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. In Proverbs 30:20, this is the way of an adulterous woman. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I have done no wrong. Just like Eve. She's done no wrong. Who did she blame? She blamed the serpent. In 2 Corinthians 11:3, this is where Paul talks about the members of the congregation who have a struggle. And the church is like a woman to Christ, and the church being infiltrated by Satan, being tempted by Satan. Thus, Paul says, but I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. What does beguiled mean? Beguiled means the seductive trickery that the serpent has actually pulled on Eve. Let's look at the crime that has been committed by Adam and Eve. In Genesis 3:7, it says, then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loin coverings. Look, if you commit a crime, you want to hide directly what you have committed. So for example, if I stole a chocolate bar from a child, and then the child's looking for a chocolate bar, and the child comes up to me, am I going to cover the chocolate bar where my genitals are? No, that doesn't make sense. Then the child's going to see, and then he's going to know that that's his candy bar. Naturally, I would hide it behind my back. That's a logical way for that child to not know, and I could continue on with my crime as if nothing happened. Same thing with Adam and Eve. It makes sense. They covered their sexual organs. They didn't cover their mouths. They didn't cover their hands. That's the crime that they've committed. They misused their sexual organs. And recently I heard that people think Adam and Eve ate from a fig tree because they later on took fig leaves to cover themselves, so it makes sense that they ate from a fig. You know what's really funny about that? Is that figs have the total package of looking like genitalia. The fig itself, from the outside, looks like testicles, and then actually when you cut it open, it looks like a vagina. Not only that, if it's a literal fruit, what's hilarious about that is it doesn't make sense if you're trying to hide yourself from the fruit that you just ate from, and you're using leaves from that actual tree that God told you not to eat from. That doesn't make sense. Why would you get caught so easily like that? Let's see what happened with the angels. What crimes did the angels commit? We check this out in Jude 1:6-7. It says, and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example. Part of the reason why they are in hell, right? Suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. So Lucifer is a great example because he has committed fornication. He's kind of like the first pedophile who has seduced young Eve. I mean, talk about bestiality. How come bestiality exists? Well, the angel's not exactly a human being. He's kind of like a beast, right? A serpent. This is coming from bestiality. It's like Eve almost had sex with the beast. So Lucifer is not only the first pedophile, but also Eve committed the first bestiality act. Anyway, let me go on. We have to remember that God told Adam and Eve, if they eat from the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they will surely die. But did they? What? There wasn't an even deal here, because you didn't see that they died right on the spot. No, God actually, God told Eve and Adam, Eve, you're gonna greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In your pain, you will bring forth children. And told Adam that he's gonna work with the sweat of his brow. He didn't tell them that from the beginning. Now the deal somehow changed? What did it mean? It means that they spiritually died. Adam and Eve had spiritually lost a connection with God. That's how they died. But again, just reading from Genesis 3:16 about Eve's pains of childbirth, since she committed a sexual sin, thus it's equally going to happen back to her that she's gonna have pains in her sexual organ when she gives childbirth. Here's the thing. I'm not saying that Cain is the only one with the serpent seed and Abel and Seth don't. As a matter of fact, everyone has original sin. The reason why Cain was of the wicked one is because Eve had sex with Lucifer first, so Lucifer could claim Cain. But then she had sex with someone that she was supposed to be with, who was Adam, and then thence God was able to claim Abel. But Cain did have a chance to redeem himself. And this is why you see throughout the Old Testament, it's always been the second child that is favored by God, and the first child is the one who always has the short end of the stick. Come on, like Ham was in a way chosen by Noah, except later on, due to his shamefulness of his father's nakedness, Shem ended up being the one who carried on the seed in which Abraham came from. Jacob and Esau was the one who ended up having the short end of the stick, but Jacob, being the second brother, was favored by God to have the birthright. People thought Jacob was being this arrogant prick, but no, he was chosen by God. Anyway, the point is, everyone has sin and everyone needs to redeem themselves. Look, in John 8:44, Jesus says, "You belong to your father the devil, and you want to carry out his desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, refusing to uphold the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, because he is a liar and the father of lies." So Jesus is confirming not only people are born with this original sin, but they could also carry out Lucifer's seed by carrying out his will. And yet likewise, those who want to inherit God's will, hence the adopted sons, will also become God's seed, will be a part of God's family. But check out this article, because there's been research that has been proven if a woman has previous sexual partners before she actually bears children, the woman could actually inherit Y chromosomes from other men, right? Men have an XY chromosome, women have XX chromosome. So if a woman has sexual partners, she could actually inherit their Y chromosome. So finally, once she has kids, well, those kids are not only inheriting the chromosomes from that woman and from that man, those kids are also inheriting the previous partner's chromosomes who had sexual relations with their mother. Thus, that's what happened with Eve. In a way, she had sexual relations with Lucifer, and she then had sex with Adam, and then they bared Cain, and then they bared Abel. They have inherited Lucifer's Y chromosome. And the whole point to unite with that tree of life is to eradicate that Y chromosome from Satan. Now, check it out. In 2 Peter 1:4 it says, "Having escaped from the corruption that is in the world by lust." The world was corrupted because of lust. Lust between who? Yeah, it was lust between Eve and Lucifer, and then to Eve and Adam. In Genesis 3:15 it says, "And I," this is God, "and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed." So check this out. Does a woman have a seed? No, she doesn't exactly have a seed. She has an egg. But how can she get a seed? She has to get a seed from a supernatural source. That is God's seed. That is of Jesus Christ, a supernatural seed that came into Mary. Now we have Christians considered to be new creatures who are spiritually engrafted to the tree of life, thus the children of the promise. And yet they are also waiting for the redemption of their bodies. When Jesus is supposed to come back, that is when we are redeemed of our bodies. Finally, develop a culture we're not tempted by our bodies. We can be pure body people just like that from the beginning, just like Adam and Eve, once the Lord of the second advent comes back.